Thanks everybody for coming. It's great to be back at Civic Hall. My name is Joe Catapano. I am the Director for Stakeholder Engagement for North America for ICANN, which stands for the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. That is one of many acronyms we have. I will do my best throughout the presentation to state them in their full names as opposed to the acronyms. I also head up ICANN's engagement with the academic sector. And I have one of our community members, Ken Herman here, who's going to help me later on to talk about the program here, which is the next round of new generic top-level domains, as well as the applicant support program, which we'll talk about here moving forward. So, there's two N's in ICANN. The last one is numbers, which doesn't get quite as much play, and I'm not going to talk about it here today, but it is very important because those are the IP addresses that are behind every website, every device, etc. like that. The first N is names, which is something I am going to talk about today. So that's more familiar to everybody. We use domain names because they're easier to remember than numbers. I'm not going to dive very deep into ICANN's technical remit today because that could be an entire presentation unto itself. But in short, it is we coordinate those names and numbers, which we call unique identifiers, to make the internet work, to get you where you want to go on the internet. That's it in a really brief nutshell. Here's a domain name. Most of you likely already know what a domain name is. It's the address of a website, and it generally has a three-part structure. There can be more depending on what portion of a site you're going to. So in this example, there are three. The first part is the subdomain, which is represented by www. Right there, World Wide Web. And then the second level domain is to the right of that. So in this example, it's ICANN. And then the third, which is the one furthest to the right, the one after the last dot, is the top level domain. And that is the part of the domain that ICANN coordinates. And that's the topic of this presentation. We have many top level domains that we're already familiar with. And you may have seen some of the new ones out there. You may have seen them and just glossed over them or not recognized them, but that's going to be the subject of what we're going to talk about here today. So the domain name system, or DNS for short, started out with just 7 general purpose top-level domains. And they're very familiar to you probably. .com, of course, .org, .net, .edu, etc. like that. In a way, new generic top-level domains are not that new. If you took mass transit to Civic Hall today and you were like me, of course I'm from out of town, so maybe you didn't need the website, but I did. So I went to it, but if you've been to it before, you may not have noticed that the MTA website is not a .gov, despite it being a public transit system. It's not a .org, it's a .info. And .info was delegated to the root zone of the internet in 2000. And there were others that were delegated at that same time. And those were new. So in 2012, ICANN launched what was called the new GTLD program, New Generic Top-Level Domain Program. And it represented the largest expansion of the DNS. And it introduced generic top-level domains, both short and lengthy. It introduced domains in different scripts, including, we call these internationalized domain names. And you may see them as IDNs for short. So you have what we call sometimes legacy domain names at the top. And then these here, with examples in Arabic, Chinese, and Japanese, these are internationalized domain names. So now, if you communicate in one of these languages, you can have a domain name in that script. Why is that nice? In the old days, you used to have to plug a separate keyboard in to get to where you wanted to go to use those characters. Now you don't. So how many are out there? More than 1,200. Many are in English, but as I mentioned before, there are many now that are not in English. I could have done an entire presentation on IDNs as well. I'm not going to do that tonight, but if you have interest in learning more about those, because we are in an incredibly multicultural city with a lot of different communities, see me after. I'm happy to talk more with you about that. So the new names. Some are just truly just generic, cut and dry. So an example on this slide is .ceo. There are others that are what we call .brands, which basically means that an organization applied for and was granted the ability to operate a domain name for their brand. There are a lot of those. So an example is like .bmw for the car company, .aarp for the Association of Retired Peoples, .apple for the company. I'll say right now that any of the domain names that I mentioned today are not an endorsement of the brand by either ICANN or myself, just using them as everyday examples for familiarity's sake. How about the one here at the bottom right, .nyc? So that is referred to as a geographic top-level domain. It's sponsored by the city of New York, and it has a Spanish equivalent, an IDN. Those names were delegated in 2014. I did have a special guest planned to come here and talk about the operation of .nyc. Unfortunately, a conflict came up and she had to back out, unfortunately. So I'm not going to go too deep into the weeds about .nyc. They have a great website where you can learn about their use cases. It's a nice example of how a new GTLD can differentiate your brand for you. .nyc is designed specifically for registrants, which is the name we use for people that just buy a website. I have joecatapano.com, so I'm the registrant for joecatapano.com. And so .nyc, you have to be in the 5 boroughs to have a .nyc. That's something that they came up with to, again, differentiate themselves from others. There were numerous interesting stories of use cases that I saw on their website. There was a barber in the East Village. There was a site about how to find fun, interesting places to eat or get coffee on side streets in New York that you probably wouldn't otherwise know about. There's a community organization working on tenants' rights, things like that. So there's really a broad swath of areas where you can go with your domain name.
Yeah, I used to run an e-commerce site on .nyc.
Okay.
Souvenirs.nyc.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Good.
Those interesting times.
I'm sure. Okay. So now there's another round. We're calling it the next round. We're calling it the new GTLD program next round. So this is the next expansion of the DNS, and it's an initiative that ICANN is implementing at the recommendation of the ICANN community. And as part of the program, in addition to providing these opportunities, we do it in a way that working with the community to ensure the security, stability, and global interoperability of the internet, because that is the core of ICANN's mission. And now, for the first time in more than a decade, businesses, communities, municipalities, and other organizations have the opportunity to apply for new GTLDs tailored to fit their needs, their interests, and the organization they represent. A GTLD is a branding opportunity, whether you're for-profit or not-for-profit. The opportunities are limitless, allowing individual businesses, again, both commercial and non-commercial alike, or entire sectors to develop a unique label for themselves on the internet. I like to think about it as the most unique domain name out there is the one that you've thought of that doesn't exist yet. New Gs can benefit people from businesses, communities from any indigenous, religious, or linguistic area. If you're a company, it's a new, potentially innovative way to address customers. Again, if you're on the non-commercial side, you're representing constituents, which I talked about an example where tenants' right. We're at Civic Hall. I was telling my colleague earlier today, the reason why this is a wonderful venue is because Civic Hall brings together a lot of these communities. You've got startups, you've got the next great business starting up in one meeting room somewhere, and you've got a civil society or a non-commercial organization working on representing their constituency in another meeting room. The blend of communities here is something that we've always really appreciated at ICANN, and we're happy, again, to be back. A little bit more about the brand benefits of a new GTLD. Some of these we've gotten used to, like SEO. Now that it's more than a decade later that we're introducing more names, we're seeing a lot of organizations use their domain name in emerging platforms like a Blue Sky or a Mastodon to create custom handles and bolster their brand identity and consistency there. So it's interesting because when you think about it, if I go out to an audience and start talking about the domain name system and dot whatever, it's like, why would I care about this? This has been around forever, and why wouldn't I just pour everything into Instagram or TikTok or whatever? There are different ways that you can use that unique property, for lack of a better word, in these other areas, Web 2.0, for lack of a better phrase. The other thing is, and I'll get into this in a minute, is that when you secure your top-level domain, your organization is the operator of that registry. I'll get into the particulars about that, but one of the high-level things is the part that may or may not be a pain in the neck is you have to do the business of operating a registry. The nice part is that it's a revenue generator, because you would get a cut of whatever domains you sell if you do that in terms of registrations and renewals. And whether you are a mission-driven organization or you are a profit-driven organization, revenue is important. So, what are the considerations that your organization needs that I haven't told you about yet? There are a few. Again, as an applicant, your organization is requesting to operate a registry that represents a part of the internet's infrastructure. Applying to operate your own top-level domain is not the same as simply going to a registrar, like a GoDaddy, and purchasing the domain name from them. Because when you purchase it from a GoDaddy or something, GoDaddy's taking care of all the technical stuff. They're taking care of operating the actual, again, that part to the furthest right. When you own your own piece of the internet, when you own your own domain, you've got to do that part. So here in the bottom, these are just two high-level items for a registry operator. What they have to do is set the requirements for the domain and determine which second-level domains, so the ones in the middle there, characters left of the dot, which can be registered and by whom those can be registered. The process of applying to operate a registry is complex. It's not something you would want to do just willy-nilly. You want to put a lot of thought behind it. All new generic top-level domain applicants must be able to demonstrate the operational, technical, and financial capacities necessary to operate the TLD. Some of these include back-end services, but some of those can be outsourced, right? You could outsource some of those things like back-end services to third parties, like what we call registry service providers. There's a big bold number there. It's probably scary. The evaluation fee is expected to be $227,000 US. More information on the fee structure is available in our FAQs on our Next Round website. There is a trove of information. If you have questions, if you're interested, you have specific questions after this, feel free to reach out to me and I can point you in the right direction. The registry operator, which your organization would be should you secure a top-level domain, plays a key role within the internet ecosystem to keep the master database of all the domain names registered in each top-level domain and generate the zone file that allows computers to route internet traffic to and from TLDs anywhere in the world. Registry operators are also responsible for maintaining the registry for their particular TLD. Some of the responsibilities of a registry operator include accepting registration requests, maintaining a database of the necessary registration data, and providing name servers to publish the zone data file. It's a lot of kind of tech-heavy terms. Zone file data is basically the information about the location of the domain name on the internet. Yeah, go ahead. Please, in the back. It's okay.
Do you have any security requirements around these?
There are. I don't have that information today, but again, if you go to the Next Round website, you'll find it there. If you can't find what you're looking for, please feel free to send me an email. I'll get you to the right area. I may have gotten you somewhat interested in the program and then promptly popped your balloon with the cost and the other tasks associated with operating a registry. Here's the good news. In this round of top level of the program, we've worked with the community to build something we call the Applicant Support Program to help make a new GTLD more attainable for entities that are interested in operating their own domain, but that may need financial or training resources to do so. And I have Ken Herman here from our ICANN community, from the non-commercial side, tri-state area resident, and going to talk to you more about the Applicant Support Program. Ken, please.
Thanks, Joe. Like you said, Ken Herman. The internet community is a multi-stakeholder community. You might know about that. There are corporations that participate in policymaking. There are the registry and the registrar operators that participate in the decision-making about how all of this machinery works. I represent the non-commercial community. We also have a stake in all of this. So if you have your own domain name and you are a nonprofit or you're just a regular human being who has a domain name that you have purchased, then you're part of the non-commercial community and you're welcome to participate in the discussions that take place regarding that. That's a little plug for my community. We're going to talk about the Applicant Support Program. Now, as Joe talked, your own generic top-level domain is not an easy thing to do. There's a lot of moving pieces. There's a lot that you have to learn. And it's mostly been for the big boys and girls, although honestly it's mostly boys. But it's really an involved activity. So what ICANN said, look, we need to get more diverse communities involved in operating top-level domains because there could be a need. In the first round, there were maybe, I think, 3 applicants, and one was accepted as a nonprofit into their application support program, which I'm going to talk about. Here, we're trying to broaden this a little bit by informing people more and by offering a bit more. Frankly, not a lot of people who are running nonprofits have the $200 and some odd $1,000 for the application fee, and that's only the beginning. Operating a registry is no small task, and it involves a lot of technical, a lot of legal, and a lot of financial requirements. But don't worry. So the Application Support Program, or ASP, is trying to make this a little bit more attainable for institutions. What kind of institutions? These kinds of institutions. We're talking about nonprofits, non-government organizations, international organizations. There's a category for indigenous tribal peoples. And as you see, micro and small businesses. The business community is included, but only in the context of it's a micro business that supports a social enterprise of some kind. These are the 4 major categories of organizations that are entitled to apply for applicant support. First, we're going to tell you about what that support is, but there's a whole application process for getting support from ICANN. So you have to be one of these. You can actually apply for more than one category. If you think you fit into more than one, you can apply for both. During the process, you'll be providing information about each of those categories that you want to apply for. And ICANN will then sort it out from there. Let's go back a little bit to one slide regarding the criteria for getting support. As you see here, you have to demonstrate something called business due diligence. You have to demonstrate that you're able to do this, that you're actually able to operate, that you have an institution that's capable of learning how to do it and actually functioning. You may not have the resources to do that today, but you have to demonstrate that you're capable of it. You have to be capable of a public responsibility, that you're not like criminals or something like that. There's a bit in there. I thought that was quite amusing myself. When I read that, I'm thinking, as I was reading through the requirements, what does they mean by public responsibility? That's what it boils down to. Principles under international law. You have to demonstrate, obviously, like everything else that comes with nonprofits, a financial need, and that you have a financial viability, that's an ongoing concern, and that you meet the eligibility status of those 4 categories that I mentioned. So what do you get? If you succeed, what do you get for all of this? You get a discount on that $227,000 or whatever financial support of the application fee, right there. It's 75 to 85. That's a range because ICANN's trying to stretch the resources that it has, and the more groups, the more entities that succeed, there's a smaller piece of the pie, but it'll be somewhere in that. You get something called a bid credit. I'll talk about that in a second, what that really is. And then you get reduction on the fees of base registry operators. Very few people actually operate their own registries. They actually pay somebody else to do that because it's a complex business. And so those costs can be mitigated somewhat as part of the application support program. More important than any financial is this non-financial support, because the application process itself is highly technical, involving not just technology, but also legal requirements, documents, like so many things. And you have to do it the right way. And if you don't do it the right way, you're going to make a mess of the application, and nobody's going to know what you're talking about, and you're going to be pushed off to the side. You're going to need help, and that's the help that you're going to get. Now, all this is in process. The application process for the new GTLDs hasn't actually begun and won't begin for quite some time. This is just the application process for support. So this is just all theoretical, but this is what you're going to get if you succeed in the applications. Where was I? Oh, bid credit. Bid credit is if there are 2 or more organizations that want the same name, that's resolved in a kind of an auction process, and to try to make it fair. And of course, if you're not really a big corporation with a lot of money, you're not really going to necessarily win that auction. So what ICANN does is actually provide some kind of credit, and it's done under a sealed bid process, I believe, is what's been decided. So it's not like you're sitting in an auction house and somebody's banging the gavel after somebody makes numbers. It's a sealed bid. And what they do, the winning bid is then discounted for a certain amount so that the applicant for the support program can potentially win. That's the best kind of description, is my understanding of how that works. So that's what that bid credit is all about. You don't need to get too focused on it, but that's what that bid credit is really all about. Okay. Now, how does this evaluation take place? This is the application. This is for support, not for the GTLD. This is for the support. So how are we going to evaluate you whether you're entitled to support? Well, there's 2 phases. The first phase is they do an administrative viewpoint. They check all the documents. They check the legal compliance. They confirm that you meet the eligibility requirements that I spoke about, those 4 categories. And there's a background screening to make sure that public responsibility, like you haven't been caught cyber squatting or doing other stuff that you shouldn't be doing on the internet. And then it moves to a second phase. And this is where they really dig into the application that you've put together. So all the details about who you are and what you do and why you want to do it and what kind of money you have and what kind of expertise you have or not have, as the case may be. But there's a third-party support applicant review panel, as you see there, that will be doing that review, takes some time, etc. All of this, by the way, you can find in the various documents that they have. There's like a 50-page application support document that describes all of the process, etc. What happens? Okay, so whether you have succeeded in getting support or not, all applicants for support have to apply for the GTLD. Once again, just to be clear, there's a process I'm talking about, which is the application for support. So you're going to get support or you're not going to get support. If you still want the name, you still have to apply for the GTLD, and that's the application process there. That will require a demonstration of technical operational requirements. There are also measures, like it says, to keep you from making a mess of the internet. That's what the deter abuse of the internet is all about. Let's look at the journey for a supported applicant. This is after you have succeeded in getting support, you've submitted all your material, you've got notification, yes, we will support you with the financial and other types of things. What happens now? Well, now you begin to think about what is going to get you to there. This at the top is the phases that you'll go through to getting the support. The bottom bar shows you the support that you're going to get. And in the middle is what's happening in your own mind. So you think about whether the TLD that you want is useful to you. Hopefully it was, or you wouldn't have applied for support in the first place. No matter. What do you need in order to apply for the TLD? Well, there's outreach events like this one. There's support within communities, etc. So you apply for your TLD. Once you start that application process, you have all of this capacity development pro bono services that you can get help with in getting your application. All of this brings you up to you submit your application. That application is hundreds of pages. It's a lot of documents. You're going to need help. And that's what we spoke about earlier. Right. Your application succeeded. Now what? You're still getting support. You're getting support in putting together how you're going to set up all of your machinery, and you're going to get support for actually operating the activities of running a generic top-level domain. That's the long and short of the application process. The application process for support opened last year, in the beginning of November, and it's going to run until next November, this coming November 2025. During that process, the application process is open. ICANN is encouraging anybody that's interested in support to apply early. It's like these rolling admissions, like a university, where, the first people can get in, and then if there's no more space, that's it. That's how it's working. It's not like they'll collect a bunch of applications and then see which one is the best. No, once they've run out of money for the support, that's when it's going to stop. I think the maximum is about 40 or something. I'm not quite sure the exact, but it's not very many. And there are applications already been submitted. Nothing's been approved yet. It's still in the early stages. The actual guidebook for applying for a GTLD won't be ready until December of this year. So the GTLD process, we don't even know how the applications for getting that new generic top-level domain is going to happen yet. So that's still in process. And in fact, it's an open process. If you go to the ICANN website, you'll find material there on the draft guidebooks for the application for the GTLD. And you're entitled to make comments about that. That's the beauty of ICANN. It is an open, multi-stakeholder process, and anyone can be involved in that. My constituency, members of the non-commercial, where we have a community members that are reading those documents to make sure that they're readable from an everyday person's perspective, and that we'll be submitting comments to that. The public comment period opens, I think, in the next couple of weeks for that. People can submit comments to it. So feel free to go and look about, and if you're really interested in a generic top-level domain, have a look and see what's going to be required for it. It's all in those documents. Hundreds of pages. I hope you're ready, but it's there. So the application guidebook will be ready in December. The applications won't open until April 2026. I think I'm finished. Is that right, Joe?
Yeah, I'll take the remainder of that.
Thanks, everybody. So that's the process. We're here to answer any questions about it. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so one thing I'm going to do, because I got a question before that I couldn't answer, unfortunately. So I'm going to write. I apologize for my handwriting. So global support at icann.org is the email address if what we're saying here today piques your interest, but you have specific questions. Ken and I will do the best we can to answer questions when we get to the Q&A portion. As Ken was saying, it's a very large undertaking. There's a lot of information. We will not have all of the answers. But if you do send an email to globalsupport@icann.org, that's where all the questions will be routed to, and someone will get back to you. Ken already went through a little bit of the timeline, so I'm not going to go through this whole kind of thing. Just on the left-hand side, you'll see the important thing, which is, if you take the bottom first, the applicant support. It opened in November of last year, stays open till November of 2025. The applicant guidebook is still going through public comment and will eventually go through. The round doesn't start until April 2026. If you are someone who, after reviewing some of this information, believes that you qualify for applicant support or that's something you're interested in, that should not preclude you from applying for applicant support. If that is something that fits your organization, you should do that, despite the fact that the actual application for the TLD itself is not till later. So this is just some links. I'll pause on this next one. These are some codes. I said a couple times, check the next round website. We've got some codes here. So the next round homepage is the one furthest to the left, and the applicant support is in the middle. And then a couple people are like, I just heard about this event yesterday. I'm not sure how to hear more about when ICANN is in New York or in wherever you may be. We have a regional mailing list. If you're interested in more content on either this program or ICANN in general, I encourage you to sign up for our mailing list. We don't spam you. We don't push a zillion things to your inbox. It's really relegated toward mostly where we are and where we're going to be and what we're going to be talking about. And you may get some very small other kind of community-focused messaging, but we're not flooding your inbox with this stuff. Okay, so that brings us to Q&A. Again, I've been working with ICANN for a while, so I've attained some technical knowledge, but I am by no means a technical expert. I will do the best I can. Hopefully Ken can fill in for me with some of the community things. The thing is, the kind of interesting way that ICANN is set up is that the community is the one that makes the rules. And I work for the staff. I'm here to execute for the community and to carry out the policies and such that the community is. But anyway, we'll do our best. I appreciate you guys coming, and with that, we'll take your questions. I see one over there.
Or nonprofits who might be interested in the applicant support program. Do you guys have any policies on fiscally sponsored projects? Like, as in, like, you're under umbrella of a nonprofit. You yourself, as an organization, is not like a fully independent organization.
Are you talking about ICANN or you?
As an applicant.
Oh, okay. Can you be more specific? Can you provide an example?
For a lot of the relatively newer initiatives, like nonprofit initiatives, at least in the US, instead of creating a 501c3 by yourself, you get under a already existing 501c3.
Oh, okay. So like you're an affiliate of a larger C3,
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
For applicant support, my understanding is that the answer is yes, from what I can tell. You have to disclose what you're part of if you're the one that's applying for support in order to apply for a GTLD. In the documentation for the application support program, it does indicate that you can apply as a subsidiary organization to a larger body. It's just a matter of disclosing what that body is and the relationship. You have to be mindful that if that larger body is a commercial entity of some kind, it may not fall within the categories of acceptance for the application support. You can certainly apply for a GTLD, but you can't, for the application support, you can't be part of a larger corporate entity that would normally have supported that.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Thanks. Oh, in the back. Yeah, please.
Okay, let's say I end up operating .5. Who gets to set the requirements
What do I get to set other than operating? The rules around, this is how auction's gonna work. For this domain, I just get this for free, I'm gonna figure out how to make money on this later.
Are you asking during the process to get the TLD or after you have it? After you have it.
What do you get to do with it as an operator?
So I mentioned that a few slides back. I'll see if I can find it. Some of the examples, at least.
If you're asking about what can you do when you have the operation of the registry, that will depend upon some factors of the kind of GTLD you have. If you're a brand or if you're a different type, I think, then the rules might be different. Regardless of what it is, there is a registry agreement between ICANN and the registry operator. There are rules by which a registry can operate. I'm not a registry, I don't work for one, I never have, so I'm not clear exactly on what those are, but I do know that there's a very tight contract between the registry operator and ICANN about what you can and cannot do.
You will have to write, hey, this is what I plan on doing with this if I become an operator during the application process.
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. That would be in the application guidebook for the GTLD, which, as I said, hadn't even been completed yet. I believe you do have to disclose what you plan to do with the GTLD. And I do believe that there are requirements for what you're going to do. So in other words, you may be able to restrict who applies for domains under that GTLD, but there are limits to what you can do with that restriction based upon the type of GTLD that you have.
That's set by ICANN.
That's a negotiation, I think, between ICANN and the potential registry operator.
Yeah, it's a really good question. Just for the rest of the audience, just more high level, bring it up a bit, because I didn't do that in this presentation. To give you a feel, if you're not familiar with the DNS ecosystem, a clunky name for the relationship, right? So the registry agreement is a biggie. The way it looks is it's a contract-based ecosystem. I'm going to use .com as an example because it's most familiar to us. So ICANN has a contract with the registry that operates .com. That entity has a contract with registrars that want to sell .com domains. That registrar also has a contract with ICANN. There's a whole kind of accreditation, being ICANN accredited. And there's an entire team at ICANN that works on that, and compliance and all those kinds of things. At a high level, it's a contract-based world. Long story short, you can't just get the TLD and do whatever the heck you want with it. You can, but within reason, within the confines of the agreements.
If maybe it helps to answer. The application process is pretty enormous, and they want to make sure, say, that you're not discriminating or something like that. But if there's a group like .nyc says it's restricted to people who reside in the 5 boroughs. So that's not discrimination, but it's a restriction. So they're going to want to check for certain things in the application process, but you don't need to outline every single detail of your entire business plan. Like your example was .hi. Let's say maybe the most valuable domain would be, depending on which way you're spelling hi, say.hi. Yeah, you could auction that to the highest bidder, and you probably don't have to explain every bit of how you're going to do that in the application, because it takes time to sort out those business decisions. But the support application process booklet, you can read now and see which things they want from you and which you can decide at a later time.
But the other thing is, and this is not something that ICANN, the organization, would do, but again, we have a community of stakeholders whose entire lives and businesses are this. And there are entities, consultants, et cetera, like that, that provide guidance on, okay, I want to apply for this thing, now I've got it, now what the hell do I do? There's an entire kind of support system out there, and there are members of the ICANN community that can help point you in the right direction. I personally, as the North America person for ICANN, the organization, will not promote any of that. What I could do is, if you reached out to me, I could say, hey, to the right constituency where those entities reside, I could say, hey, this person's interested in talking to you about this. Here you go. Thank you very much.
In the 2012 round, there was a question about what is your concept for your TLD? I think that's what this gentleman is asking about. I think in the current round, they're not going to have that. They're not going to ask it. And in fact, when they did that, they said it's only so we get an idea of what people are doing. It's not like a go or no-go decision from our side. I wanted to say that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just
John,
following
go
up
ahead.
on that, with a community application, I seem to remember there was a problem with .gay where they refused it or something. They said the people didn't show that they represented the whole community. Has that process changed in this round?
I don't know.
I'm not sure, and as you said, the guidebook's not completed, so I don't want to speak out of turn.
There's two quick questions. First, what's the character minimum for GTLDs?
3, yeah. There are some out there that are 2, right, that are like .co. Those are country code top-level domains. There's one for US. .co is actually Colombia, so things like that. We won't go into that zone because then you get into all sorts of nasty stuff.
Second question, can you talk more about the bidding process?
The bidding process has been a subject of intense discussion within ICANN. It has been settled. I don't know the details. Sealed bids as opposed to an open bidding process is what I understand. And that's probably the heart of it. But it is in the material that's been developed, and there's a whole section for that. If I told you anything more, I'd probably get it wrong.
We're early in the game here today. If this is something where you feel like the path you want to pursue, and I can be of help in either organizing something, whether it's remote or whatever, or steer you in the direction of the right person or organization that can help you with that, just please find me, let me know, and I'm happy to facilitate that and either point you in the right direction or if it falls within something that the staff does, I'm happy to do that too.
I was transcribing something the other day and I thought that I read that there's a change in this round. And if you have someone else handling your back end, last time you had each time every applicant, their back end person had to go through all the due diligence. And so now a back end operator can just do that once. They only have to go through one and they can handle a number of applications. Is that true?
And I'm not 100% clear, but that is my understanding. There is a separate process for validating registry operators as backends. And there's a whole application process to that, including a fee associated with accrediting the registry operation services. Thank you for that question, because if you wish to operate your own registry and not outsource it, you have to apply to that process of accreditation for registry operations, and you have to pay that fee for doing that.
Does the support program cover that as well?
No, it does not.
Okay.
I don't believe it does, actually. But I might be wrong. I didn't really focus on that quite so much. There may be some reductions in cost for services for that, so don't quote me on that. But there is still a payment if you want to do that. And these payments are to cover the cost of ICANN. But just as an aside, the application cost is so high because ICANN is a nonprofit institution, and this is something that it's doing, but it has to be zero cost for ICANN. So all these application fees are to cover the costs of reviewing the applications.
It's the cost of
The program.
not the operating budget
The
of the
operating costs,
organization.
yeah.
Are there examples of nonprofits or the types of companies you showed in those 4 pillars that are using TLDs today? Or not really?
There are.
So I use my .aarp as a nonprofit. It's a large one, but that's an example of a larger nonprofit.
And the registry that operates the .org, it's the Public Interest Registry, PIR, they operate .giving, .ngo, and the variant, and some others. They did that through the first round. The only supported nonprofit, I believe, that won in the first round was .kids. And that's the only thing I know about it. There aren't many, but there are some.
Going back to the question about contention sets and the resolution of contention sets where there's more than one applicant for a domain, would you say it's virtually certain that they will not be auctioned, or if they are auctioned, neither of the applicants will get the proceeds?
Yeah,
I can't say with certainty on any of that.
But all I know about that, because it's not the kind of thing that I really follow, is that there's intense discussion among the participants and the intellectual property owners and et cetera about how all of that will work. And I think that all I can say is that my impression is that ICANN is doing all it can to try and avoid some of the messiness that happened in the first round. I don't know what that messiness was, but it apparently was pretty much.
Maybe I can look this up somewhere. Seems like a lot of people are in the know, but I'm not. Okay, let's say I go operate that chair. I become the operator of this. What's preventing me to like just hike up the price of that chair? I'm only going to sell it to Harvard Miller and some other big companies. I'm only going to give them the opportunities.
Well, we have costs every year, you have to renew the environments. So if nobody buying your chairs, what are you gonna do?
But there's a practical matter. I don't know what ICANN would do about that, but I do know that ICANN has a fairly robust compliance department. If you have a contract, as we've described, as an operator, and the terms of those are reviewed by ICANN on a basis, I don't know what basis, but they are reviewed, and I suspect that if you're out of compliance with your contractual requirements, that ICANN has the right to do something about it.
How quickly does this compliance process happen? It takes a while.
Yeah, perhaps. I don't know the answer to that.
Hi, I understand that we're ahead of the game right now, so a lot of the questions don't have an answer, but can you talk about how some of these questions are going to be resolved and walk us through the process for how ICANN will resolve some of these outstanding questions?
And I think, and I'll let Ken add some color to this, we spit out the phrase applicant guidebook a lot, which is not finalized yet. The applicant guidebook is the rules of the road for the program. When that's finalized, you'll have more firm answers to a lot of these questions. The policy development process at ICANN, in addition to ICANN, someone like myself who works for the staff, there's thousands of volunteers and community members like Ken who work to develop these processes. And those folks come from the business community, civil society, academia, government, technical community. So that's why it takes time. ICANN, the organization, is not an entity where the CEO can say, okay, we're doing this, now go do it. That's not the way it works. Ken, do you have anything else to add?
It's an interesting process. As Joe says, by the time the applicant guidebook is completed at the end of this year, any of those issues or all of those issues really should be resolved, because there are a lot of people looking at it and a lot of people asking questions like you are here. The way that gets resolved is through consensus of all of the stakeholders involved. There's a registry community, and they have an interest in operating registries in a certain way that makes most sense for them. That may conflict with the way we in non-commercial might look at it from, say, a human rights perspective. The registries are contracted with registrars who are the retail face of buying domain names. Most registries don't sell domain names, they sell them through registrars. And that's a contractual arrangement between ICANN, the registrars, and the registries, and they have an interest in doing things a certain way. And all of those happen in a multi-stakeholder discussions that take months and months to resolve until consensus is reached on whatever the contentious issue is. That's the way the process works.
But just to cap that off, even though, as I think Ken mentioned before, if this is something you're seriously thinking about, even though the guidebook is not finalized, there is a draft out there. It's out there for public comments. You can take a look at that, or you can ask me, like, where's the draft of the applicant guidebook so I can take a look at it. I'm happy to point you in the direction. You can take a look at that and get a sense, get a feel at least, of where the guardrails are for things.
This section's already been published and approved, right? It's not like it's going to be one big book handed at the end of the year. It's coming out piecemeal, so like you said, but it's not going to vary a lot from that, so that's going to give you
What are the learnings? I got into this in 2014. Okay. So I remember the big bang of the names. I think there was less than 100 or maybe around 100. After it became 1,200 or so. So what are some of the lessons and learnings you guys have from that?
Good question. I was involved in it only peripherally. I worked at the UN at the time, and the UN was interested. I was a coordinator for technology in the UN system, and they were concerned about second-level domain names being protected. UNICEF something or other, UNICEF was concerned about that. All the UN organizations were. So there was a lot of legal discussions between how those, or even if those would be protected. That's the kind of the issues that I know of, and I don't think that was, frankly, ever resolved. There are a lot of lessons that were learned from that process to smooth it out. things like how the bidding process would work and how contentions would be resolved, as well as how to manage the whole process. There's a tremendous amount of material on the ICANN website, and if you have a look at it or go to your search engine and search for new GTLD at ICANN, and you'll find a tremendous amount. One thing that ICANN is notorious for is transparency. And I use the term notorious because if you want to drink from a fire hose, that's the place to go.
But here's an example of something, a lesson learned that a tangible solution was put forth on. I wasn't working for ICANN during the application period, the previous round in 2012. However, that bold number was $185,000. Some people could afford that. A lot of people couldn't. Now, more people can because of the applicant support program. So that's an example of a kind of a tangible, like identifying a gap and the community figuring out a way to plug it.
And just as an aside for this question about what you can do with your GTLD, there was a question that ICANN wrestled with, something called closed generics. I get a generic top-level domain, dot whatever, and I say I do with only what I want, and I will approve who can do it. That was discussed at great length in ICANN, and the answer was no, unless you're a brand. Brands, of course, are a form of closed generics, where companies use the second level in order to help manage their internal business operations. It provides an enhanced level of security for them since they control everything, but they're not selling any of that. If you're going to sell, then you have to sell according to the terms that you agreed to. So that was an issue that came up very early in the discussion, was discussed at the first round. I happened to follow that discussion because it had some substantial non-commercial impacts. The recommendation from the policy committees were to avoid that at this time. They will not be entertaining closed generics. And that was that, but they were entertaining that in the first round, and that was put on hold.
Just beyond the ICANN website, Circle ID and Steve Crocker, who was the former chair of ICANN, has just started doing a video series with Circle ID called Beyond DNS, and they actually talk about the history of the last round and what happened in those videos, so I recommend.
Does ICANN do other events or talks?
Yes, we do. Our mailing list is the best way to stay up to date on what we are doing in the region. Are you based in New York? Are you based here? Yeah. So I will say I'm based in DC. I'm up here frequently for a number of reasons. I have family nearby. But the mailing list is the best way because we'll crank out what we're doing. We do a lot of virtual stuff too, remote things. So if we're not in New York, there's other ways to plug in. But yeah, we're not in some black box sitting in some random city somewhere.
And the three biggest global meetings are also, you can attend any of that online. It's free in person, but it's also available to anyone online because of this reason.
Yeah. See me after. I'd love to talk more about it if you want. Oh, Ken, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Ken. All right. Anything else for me? Please help yourself to more refreshments if you like. And thanks so much for coming. I really appreciate it. So, thank you.